this. When we look at what is the prevailing paradigm in both the scientific community and academia, it is Darwinism. Everything works and moves off of the Darwinian theory. There is no supernatural, there is no God, there is no ultimate right or wrong. It's all moral relativism, no moral absolutes, moral relativism, situational ethics. So it's, as long as you're not hurting anybody, everything is okay, that whole deal. And that's where we are. We're in a post-Christian world. Okay, I get that. So how do we as Christians live in this post-Christian world? And we see that it's very difficult. If we're interested in biology at all, we have to adopt the Darwinian paradigm. Again, the Darwinian paradigm is everywhere. I mean, it's absolutely, we are surrounded by it. It is, when I go down to Peru and I walk into the museum in Lima, guess what I see? I see the same little silly chimp deciding to stand up one day, hunch over, and then we see the progression to modern man. Of course, that's just made up, completely made up, a totally bogus deal. No one knows any of this stuff, and we know that from a DNA, the oxyribonucleic double helix of life, the spiral of life, as I've come to call it, that everything creates or reproduces its own kind.
Right.
And this is a very complex coding system. Darwin didn't know anything about DNA. It was only discovered by Watson and Crick several decades ago. So, discovered, but it's always been there. Complex coding system. And this is why when Dawkins looks at this, he goes, well, this just didn't arrive by chance. Someone had to create this somewhere. And this is the whole idea of intelligent design. But Dawkins is okay with intelligent designers like someone from Zeta Reticuli, let's say, but not the God of the Bible. And of course, we as Christians believe that God of the Bible created everything ex nihilo. So we are in direct loggerheads with the Darwinian theory. However, the Darwinists are looking for our origins. The movie of several years ago, Prometheus, delved into this big time. It was kind of a movie, but the bottom line is, what was it promulgating? It was promulgating panspermia. What does ancient aliens, every Friday night, they talk about this, that we were visited by extraterrestrials, blah, 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 blah. Every single Friday night they talk about this. They are winning the war. They dominate the conversation. The Christians, for the most part, they don't even talk about it. For the most part, the church has got its head in the sand, won't even address this. Meanwhile, ancient aliens every Friday night. Look, you can call them kooks or everything else, but when you stand there at Sacsayhuaman in Peru, 12,000 feet above sea level, and I've been there, my hands have touched those rocks on that wall, and we look at 120-ton stones made of andesite, which are 7 on the most hardness scale, diamond being a 10. And we see that the quarry is miles away, and there are no beasts of burden. And in the Neolithic, which is 3,500 years ago, there are no iron tools. They've got hardened copper. You cannot cut andesite stone with a copper chisel. You can't. Just show me. You can't do it. And not only that, how do you move 120-ton stone to the site? And not only that, how do you create polygonal shaped angles in the stone and then dress them so perfectly that you don't need mortar, and the stone next to it fits precisely with no space?
So
I've shown these pictures to architects and engineers, and everybody just scratches their heads.
So then, if it's not aliens, like the crazy-haired guy on Friday night says, and
Georgios Tsoukalos, right?
Yeah, and if it's not, the indigenous people, then who did it?
I have come to call places like Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, another site in South America, Chichen Itza, the Great Circle Mountain in Ohio, Cahokia. I call it fallen angel technology, Nephilim architecture. And when we plug the fallen angels into all of this, everything begins to make sense. Let me just tie this into Scripture.
Sure.
We know from the biblical prophetic narrative, specifically stating in Genesis 3, that the seed of the serpent will be at war, at enmity with the seed of the woman. That's very graphic. It's in your face. We can tap dance around that and say, well, it really doesn't mean sperma, all this stuff. Fine, tap dance all you want. The bottom line is the seed of the woman manifests and becomes the Messiah roughly 2,000 years ago. Becomes Messiah. The seed of the woman becomes Messiah. The seed of the serpent, go over 3 chapters later, who's there? The Nephilim are on the earth. The Nephilim are on the earth. The sons of God see the daughters of men, and the sons of God, by the way, are always B'nai Ha-Elohim. We can tap dance around that all we want and say, well, it's the godly line of Seth, but that's not what the text says. The Hebrew is B'nai Ha-Elohim, which always points back to the angelic host of heaven. Read Job, the same verbiage is used in the book of Job. So there it is. So, and what we see is the sons of God marrying the daughters of men and creating this hybrid entity known as the Nephilim. And that's the reason for the flood. This is why it's imperative to understand what happens in Genesis 3, because if we don't, then in my opinion, the rest of the biblical prophetic narrative becomes obtuse, becomes obscure. We don't understand that there's a seed war, and the seed of a serpent will eventually culminate in the physical union of the fallen cherub with some woman on this planet, creating literally the Antichrist.
So, I mean, that leads into a number of different questions. I mean, after Noah, we still have giants. Are the giants the same as Nephilim, or the Nephilim creators of the giants? And if that's the case, are today's, I don't know, aliens or grays or whatever, are they somehow related to the Nephilim and these giants?
This is a really complex question, and it moves us into an area which quite frankly, to me, is very unsettling, for one. For two, it took me, and I'm the guy who's researching this stuff, it took me 2 years to get my head around it. And I kept going up to the line and just go, I can't go there, and running back. And then I eased my way up to the line again, and I'm not dealing with this. And finally, I remember talking to, again, the late David Flynn. I said, Dave, I want to run something by you. And this is very troubling to me. So I ran my theory by him, and he kind of chuckled, and he said, yeah, I got there a while back, and it took me a while to deal with all this, because your head begins to reel. Demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, and we have biblical texts which will certainly address that. But that's what they are, in my opinion. Now, other people disagree with that. That's fine. Fallen angels are fallen angels. They don't need anything to inhabit, to manifest in this dimension. They can just manifest. The proof text of that will be Satan is tempting Jesus, literally, and he takes him places. How does he do that? How does he move him from the desert onto a high place?
Great question. That's what's called a hook in broadcasting. Stay where you're